Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well this evening. Today I've got some, very interesting, terrifying, thought-captivating encounters to share with you. You'll see why when you hear them. But before we get into these encounters, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, the audiobook, Volume 1, 2, and 3, written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny, is available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. The links to those books are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Also, everybody, happy Valentine's Day. I'm really not big into this holiday. I don't have a heart. I'm just kidding. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And I don't know. I hope that everybody is happy and full of joy and love. And I don't know. What is Valentine's Day besides a Hallmark holiday? Anyway, on to the encounters. Today's first encounter. This encounter happened in Savannah, Georgia between 1976 and 1978. When I was stationed at Hunter Army Airfield, I remember quite well because 78 is when I started my 5-year stint in Mannheim, Germany. One morning early, around 6 a.m., I was sitting in the mess hall when a friend of mine by the name of Joseph came in looking worn out, ragged, tired, and sleepy. "Damn, Joe, what's wrong, man? What happened to you?" "Gary, I had a rough night. Something tried to get in my trailer." "What?" "Yeah, man, something big, something huge." He told me that he could hear this thing breathing outside of his trailer and walking up and down the length of it. I think he said that this thing actually shook his trailer and/or the back door. He told me he kept asking who it was, but got no answer. He said he had a gun, but was too afraid to shoot through the trailer in case it was just someone playing a joke on him. This thing stayed out by Joe's most of the night, and looking back on things, that night, Joe told me that he had noticed that when he got home that evening, it was still early, but most of the park seemed to have gone to bed. Most of the lights were out, and the dogs were crying as if they were afraid of something. I don't know if anyone has ever heard a dog cry with fear or dread. Then they'll know what I'm talking about. One day here in Petersburg, Virginia, I happened to be passing by the vet's office when I heard the dogs crying inside. A storm was approaching, and they knew it, and they were afraid. What was it that came to Joe's trailer that night? A werewolf or something akin to a werewolf? Today's second encounter. This is my encounter. I'm now 53 years old and my brother is 51. Both of us remember, and neither one of us will ever forget. We were just kids, and our mother, now deceased, had always told us not to stay out so late at night. Of course, we really didn't listen. Young, hot kids trying to be grown. I grew up in a place called Vernon, Texas. And what I'm about to tell you is where these events took place. I, and not just a few other people, grew up with talking about going out at night and having the feeling of being watched. It was always creepy, an eerie feeling that was always there and never went away. The years were late 60s, early 70s. This little town was about 12 to 14,000 people. It was spooky, and our part of town was dark, with very little lighting. Back then, dogs ran loose at night, all kinds and all sizes. The next-door neighbor had a dog named Rex, a big, powerful dog that ran loose at night as well. I remember so very well many times of walking home at night and whistling for Rex. He would come and get me, take my hand in his mouth, and lead me up to my doorstep. He wouldn't let me go until I was safe on my doorstep. Was he protecting me from something? I really think he was. No matter how hard I tried to take my hand from his mouth, I couldn't. He would have nothing of it. He was big, powerful, and strong. We found him dead one morning with his throat torn out, as we did with my grandfather's dog Butch. Something was going around the neighborhood at night, killing the dogs. This something tried to get into our house one night. It happened like this. I came home late one night, followed a little while by my brother, Bobby. We settled down for the night in separate rooms. It was only a few minutes when he jumped out of bed, hollering, yelling, and screaming that some big thing, growled and snarled like a big bear or lion, was trying to get into his window. Dad and I, the whole house actually, woke up. I remember loading my .22 and putting it by my bed. I have no idea what Dad did. The next day, we were all talking about it outside within earshot of the next-door neighbor. Someone had made a statement that, he was just dreaming. No, said our neighbor. She heard this thing too, and it was indeed in the back of our house with a whole lot of dogs after it. I and a few others walked the streets at night with our dogs and our guns, but we never saw or heard anything. But that feeling of being watched always remained. My brother would not go back in that back room for a long time, nor would he let night catch him from that house. If he did, he would trick someone into walking him home. What was that creature that tried to get in the window on my brother? Some sort of Dogman? There's no doubt in my mind that these creatures or creatures similar to the werewolf do exist. Today's third encounter, Johnson City, Tennessee. I was sitting on the side of the wall of a rather large hollow which consisted of very thick underbrush and lots of evergreen and a larger valley leading to first a clearing and then onto the graveyards. My cousin was with me and we were the world's greatest mystery, women. Joking. All of a sudden we heard the brush in the hollow below us rattling, and you could tell that whatever was making this sound was large. Luckily, I had my Ruger 10/22 and approximately 150 rounds of ammo magged and stacked and ready to go. I could barely make something out coming towards us. I did have the rifle equipped with a night vision scope, and I could make out an outline of what appeared to be a man. Upon further inspection, I found it was not. There were 2 large walnut trees about 25 feet in front of us, and whatever came from the woods was using these trees for cover. But as it stepped out for what I took as a charge, I opened fire. Within 2.5 seconds, I emptied the first 25-round mag into the creature and was starting on my next. After all was said and done, the round, number 151, was entering the target. I suggested that we start a retreat for the house, about 65 feet behind us. No more ammo in the .22, so I went for my .380 auto. That was a spare on my leg. The thing that was freaking me out the most was that after all the shooting, 95% of which I know hit it, the creature was weaving back and forth between the trees. No screams, no apparent pain, no nothing. We finally made it to the house, and after a sleepless night, we got up the next morning to see if we could find anything. All we saw were a lot of spent shell casings between the 2 walnut trees, and there were about 7 to 8 bullet holes in both of them, meaning I had struck my target numerous times. And the ground looked like it had been danced upon. This concludes my story of how one night I did indeed dance with the devil. Upon later inspection, we were shocked to discover that each trap had been sprung and all the bait had been extracted. Having seen this, we returned home to double-check the traps to make sure they were set correctly, and they operated properly. I was looking for my pre-teenage cousin and my guinea pig, but after careful consideration, I found a stick that was almost as good. The traps were then placed at different locations around the previous activities, and we received the same disappointing results. No further traps were set, but a hike up the easternmost ridge revealed a quite large system of tunnels made up of brush and various sizes of tree limb, vine, and leaves. These catacombs were obviously not made by a man as revealed in their construction. They were approximately 2.5 feet tall by 4 feet wide, and was made up into 3 passageways intertwining into the main chamber in the center. We then discovered these. I was convinced we found the lair of the beast. We all got that same "we're being watched" in the woods feeling and decided to rather quickly return home. I was sitting in my grandmother's backyard smoking the night last cigarette. I had been off of work for some time and was just talking with my cousin. This creature was approximately 7 to 8 feet tall, 450 to 500 pounds, covered with thick black fur. It did resemble the ever so popular Bigfoot image that each and every one of us are quite familiar with, except for the fact that it was slimmer in shape, almost skinny. And it did, in fact, have a neck. Also protruding on either sides were long, tapered horns, also black in color. On the top of the head also resided a horn pointing straight up. All the horns were approximately 5 to 6 inches in length, and were the same dark color, just as the creature. Almost exact same spot, also the traps had been set and sprung with no avail. Skeletal remains of rabbit, fox, birds, and other mid-sized game had been found. Occurrences always took place in the dark, as before mentioned. We would set the traps consisting of ground beef, and the steel traps ranging from the average bear trap to a more primitive step in the loop, get pulled up by a vine trap. This was on an old Indian burial ground approximately a quarter of a mile down into the hollow from which the creature came. Also, another graveyard approximately 3/4 of a mile northeast of this occurrence. Well, not Native American as far as occupancy is concerned. This second graveyard contains occupants that were born in the late 1700s. Also, this site is the victim of modern man and his machines, the building of suburbs and neighborhoods to accommodate a fastly growing area. Had resulted in many of the residents of this relatively old graveyard to be uprooted from their place of rest and replanted at a location that I have yet to determine. Go figure. Footsteps on the relatively soft ground about 150 yards to the left of us, tree branches being broken, brush rattling, something snorting, best compared to an enraged bull up before charging. Today's fourth encounter. Tangipahoa Parish, Louisiana. 3 friends and I had been to a movie and dinner, and we were riding around talking as we crossed the Tangipahoa River Bridge, and as we approached a small bridge immediately after, we saw someone walk up out of the ditch on the passenger side of the car. The height of this person made me think giant, We drove to the next available spot in order to turn around and go back, and when we returned, this person was still standing on the side of the road. We angled our car to make full use of the headlights, and we stopped in the road. This guy had to be at least every bit of 7.5 foot tall and pretty hefty, I'd say around 325 pounds. He appeared to be wearing a pair of pants and a shirt that was dark blue and very tattered. We didn't notice if he wore any shoes. The most horrifying feature was the shape of his nose, which resembled a snout, and instead of having 2 eyes, there was only one located off the center of his forehead. After a minute or two, this guy turned and walked back down the incline of the woods, and we sped away. When we reached the nearest town, we went to the police and made our report, and we were scoffed immediately. My 3 friends and I have often discussed this night, and our only conclusion is that it was a malformed person that had been kept locked somewhere and had escaped. All 4 of us lived no matter than 5 miles of this sighting, and have never heard anyone else talk about it. This thing resembled a giant because of the height and weight. It had some sort of nose or snout. It was long and extended about 6 inches from its face. It only had 1 eye, which was off-centered to the left of his forehead. Today's 5th encounter. When I was in college, I often went backpacking with friends and sometimes by myself. On spring break of 1980, I didn't want to go to the beach. Instead, I went to a camp area in Kisachie National Forest. I used the main trail and shared campsites with 2 other campers the first 2 days. But I decided to go off trail with map and compass the last 2 days of my trip. I had just broken up with my boyfriend and needed some thinking time. I was in a little valley between 2 hills. I had camped out about 75 to 100 feet above a little creek in the clearing. The weather was nice and cool, and the moon was bright, either full or near full. I set up camp, and after dinner, I put out the fire, got in my tent, and got in a sleeping bag. I had hung my food, as you do, for bear about 100 yards uphill from camp. The tent was placed so the mosquito netting entrance faced the creek, and the foot faced in the direction of the food. I wanted to watch the deer and other animals come out and drink when the sun came up. Sometime around 4 in the morning, I heard something making noise in the general direction of where the food was hung, but it didn't sound like a black bear. It sounded big. I woke up and thought, "Don't make a sound. That sounds like a big wild boar rooting around, and they'll tear you up. Don't move a muscle." I listened as this big thing slowly and heavily moved through the dense woods outside of the clearing. A minute later, I smelled something like a skunk, and I thought, great, now I have a skunk nearby as well? Don't move, or it will get scared and spray the tent. I happened to be sleeping on my stomach. I then heard the big thing splash across the creek, tromp part way up the hill. I poked my head to see if I could see it. It came into sight in the moonlight on the other side of the creek. Just on the moonlit side of the tree, it was hunkered over, looking at the ground. It dug a little hole and squatted, and after a minute, it buried or covered the spot. For just a second, I thought it might have been a tall, drunk camper looking for a place to do number 2. I thought the person might be drunk because of all the noise they were making, but I thought it was strange because most people stick close to the trail, and I was going cross-country. Besides, they had no flashlight. I could still smell that skunky smell. Later, I realized it was not a skunk, and I was very lucky because I was downwind from it. Then it stood up. It was not a wayward human camper. It was at least as tall as a household door, and about as wide and very hairy. It stood tall and stretched. Then it walked uphill into the woods and out of sight. I was completely terrified. I stayed rooted inside of the tent till sun came up. I'd never been afraid in the woods prior, but until the sun came up, my heart jumped in my throat with the tiniest sound. I walked across the creek and saw some smeared marks, but no distinct footprints. I did not find the potty hole, but did find the tree it stood near, and judging from the height of the large branch, confirmed my initial impression that it was about the height of a door. I was very nervous and just wanted to get out of there. I had planned to camp Saturday night as well, and then just go and visit my family for Easter. But after this incident, I quickly broke camp, packed up, cut the trip short, cut to the main trail, and got the hell out of there. The creature's description, it was dark in the moonlight, but it was clearly humanoid shape, hunkered down over the first while it was looking for a good place to relieve itself. But about 7 or so feet tall, and then it stood up. Definitely very shaggy all over, but not human, and not a gorilla either, because it walked bipedally away up the hill, no knuckle dragging. I didn't see its face clearly, and there was no eye shine. Today's 6th encounter. Canadian County, Oklahoma. Me and my friend went to our neighborhood dead end. We stayed there a little bit long, and it started to get dark. We started heading back. You have to understand that the dead end leads into some woods. Like I was saying, we started heading back when we heard crouching of twigs and dried leaves. At first, we thought it was a bum because a lot live out there. They come out at night, but we saw what direction it came from and looked. What we saw was what we thought a Great Dane, although the head was shaped more like a horse. More like a camel. It was on all fours, so we thought it was a dog, but it stood up and walked perfectly on its hind legs. We noticed the wings. They were small, but definitely wings. We weren't sure what it was, but we got out of there very quickly and quietly as we could. I looked up different animals, strange animals, Bigfoot, for example. I saw a picture of the Jersey Devil and thought, God, that's what I saw. I can't explain it. It's just too weird and too scary. I reported this because I thought it may be interesting. About a year later, we went there again, just to the front entrance, and we saw something shadowy. It was moving around with glowing yellow eyes, and we ran like hell. Today's 7th encounter, Geneva, Alabama. I've been hunting for squirrels for 2 days, and had been really nervous the whole time. I noticed that the place that usually has a bunch of squirrels had none, and there weren't any deer track, but very large cat or something track. Me and 2 other friends decided to camp out at an old empty lot. My granddad left to get some food in town. We were sitting on the truck and had been there for an hour. My friend said he saw a bobcat looking at him from the woods about 100 yards away. I got the 222s and 2 shotguns and the pistol and sat them on the hood of our truck. He then saw something that was about 3 to 4 feet shoulder high walking on all fours about 50 feet in front of me. Now, I've been close to coyote and never been scared, but my hair on my neck was standing up, and I couldn't get the gun out of its holster. We then jumped into the truck and flew to my house and told Papa. He said we were probably our imagination. I should have mentioned we were 15. We went back and drove through the lot and drove down the road and ran and got Josh's Australian Shepherd, a ninja sword, and a machete. When we were running down the road with my spotlight, we startled a lady driving and made her mad. She came back and I told her we had something after us, and she said that her husband had seen something in the road a few days back. When we pulled back into the lot, there was something big and black standing on my hunting bucket. It had crushed it, and the styrofoam was strewn everywhere. We slid to a stop, but couldn't get a shot off. I then tried to do a donut in the truck, but hit the guide wire on a pole line and couldn't get loose, so we loaded our guns and did military runs, singing and yelling and occasionally shooting in the air to make sure it wasn't coming back. Later, my papa came and we told him what we saw. He took us back to the house, but on the way I drug my feet on the ground on the way back. That night, about 2 hours later, we heard a thing growling and walking around the house we fell asleep in. And then the next morning, when we woke up, we headed to the lot. We saw big cat tracks in the tracks from the day before. When we got to the truck, we started looking for clues, and we found a tree that was standing up, lying on the fence, with big scratch marks on it. Later on, we were sitting on the tailgate, and we saw it sitting on the ground across the lot looking at us. By then, we were all just getting mad and went after it. We got back into the woods and saw a milk jug sitting in the middle of nowhere. I decided to take a shot at it, but when I looked through my scope, I saw a long tail curling. I took a shot and saw a drop of blood, but that's it. And we didn't see it again. But I'm still hunting for it, and I would like to kill it, as nothing is going to be on my land that is going to chase me. I guess I should have mentioned that a few days before that, my friend's horses had been run through the fence and killed. They also ran his thoroughbred mare around, and he said that it was big and black. I'm a deer hunter, and I estimate its weight to be around 250, maybe 300 pounds. I think the height is 3 to 4 feet high, about 4.5 to 6 feet long. Also, the deer season preceded this, my friend said that he heard a scream, and a fox that was in the field growled and ran into the woods and started fighting with something. The next morning he went back and found the fox ripped to pieces. I have no clue what this is, but the game warden said it could not be a panther. The description of the creature: 250 to 300 pounds, 4.5 to 6 feet long, 3 to 4 feet tall, black, very hairy, long black tail, and a small snout. Today's 8th encounter comes to us from Illinois. Me and my friend and his girlfriend were coming home from work in Marion. She lives in Redacted, so we took her home. She lives out in the middle of nowhere. When we got out of the truck to stretch out, I felt like I was being watched by something in the woods. The woods are so thick where we were at the time you couldn't see anything beside open field before you get to her house. Her dog was going rabid, barking like crazy. I could feel that we were not alone out there. By the time we pulled out of her driveway, we drove about 3 minutes. My friend was driving, I was looking out the window, and there was a gate with an open field. Beyond the gate was a werewolf-looking creature with glowing yellow eyes. As I stared at it, I was tranced for about 4 to 5 seconds. I yelled out, "What the hell is that?" My friend said he thought he had saw something, so we stopped the truck for a second and looked back. The werewolf creature jumped over the fence and started running toward the truck. My friend hit the gas, and the creature was close behind, but luckily was not fast enough. After we were in town, my friend told me that he had seen the big creature run across the road earlier in the morning a few days before, but didn't think anyone would believe him. Well, I believe there are werewolves or dogmen after that in Bigfoot, but the only thing I can say is what we saw that night. It scared the shit out of me and him. The creature was about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. It had yellow glowing eyes, trancing eyes, black and gray hair, a long snout just like a dog's, but had long fangs. It stood up like a man, but was much larger. Missing cattle, mutilated deer, dog, and other animals have been found in the area. I've also heard of reports of cattle missing and deer found tore to pieces. I've heard other stories about this creature. We're scared shitless. Next time we go back, we are taking our guns along with some silver bullets just in case. Today's 9th encounter, Tennessee, Warren County. 2 witnesses, a brother and sister, were sitting out on their back patio when they stated they saw what appeared to be a bipedal, light gray-colored creature that appeared to have a head shaped like a feline walk slowly out of the tree line toward a pond. Upon reaching the pond, the creature bent over and took a drink. They both agreed that the creature had large canines that were visible even at the distance they were, about 100 yards. After drinking from the pond, the creature stood once more and left in the same direction that it came from. This all took place within 2 to 3 minutes. Brief description of the creature: man-sized, hair-covered, light coloration, cat-headed with enlarged canines they guessed to be 4 to 5 inches in length. None that I know of concerned cat-headed creatures, but this area is close to Short Mountain, which has a number of Sasquatch sightings attributed to it. Today's 10th encounter. This encounter does not belong to me, but to someone who told it. He travels a lot, and on one of his long trips he pulled over to the side of the road to sleep, as he often does. He parked his car near a cemetery at Ripley, Oklahoma. He made a point of letting me know that he has slept beside cemeteries before, and it has nothing to do with the story except to tell the exact location. After he had lied down to sleep, he heard a noise and sat up in the car. He looked out the front window just as something ran in front of the car, making a loud noise. I asked him what it looked like, and he insisted that the shape and size of the body was a lot like an ostrich. He told me that at the very first, he did think it might be an ostrich until he looked at the head. He said that the head was shaped sort of like a horse's head. He said it wasn't exactly like a horse's head, but that it was the general shape it resembled most. I asked him to describe the sound, and he really was at a loss to describe it, except that it was very loud and aggressive sounding. He used the term aggressive several times to describe the sound. He states that he stuck out his revolver in his waistband and just sat there for a couple of minutes before deciding to find another place to park and sleep. Alright guys, there's today's upload. I hope everyone has a wonderful Valentine's Day. And thanks for always listening. And I really appreciate the support of the amount of work that I do on the channel. It really means a lot to me. You guys really, really make the channel go. So thanks. I hope everyone has a great and blessed day today. See ya!